Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr made a massive series of stock sales worth up to $1.7 million before the coronavirus market crash. New analysis from researchers at Dartmouth University shows just how unusual Burr's trades were. And as NPR's Tim Mack reports, that irregular trading activity is likely to be of interest to federal investigators now probing the senator's stock transactions.
The North Carolina Republican has historically been a poor stock picker. Most of the stocks he purchased have done poorly, and he typically sold stock at low volumes, on average 3.4 times per quarter. But on one day, February 13th of this year, Senator Burr broke this pattern and made 30 transactions, representing a significant portion of his net worth. The stocks he sold went on to do very poorly, underperforming similar stocks by 8%. That cluster of sales, before the market crash due to coronavirus concerns, was one of the lawmakers' only market-beating trades since record-keeping began 8 years ago. Tim Mack, NPR News, Washington.
As the effects of the coronavirus pandemic continue to decimate the U.S. economy, the number of people filing initial claims for unemployment benefits continues to rise. The Labor Department announces another 5.2 million people joined the jobless rolls last week, meaning that in just the past month, upwards of 22 million people have filed unemployment claims, the worst stretch of U.S. job losses on record. It means roughly 1 in 7 U.S. workers have lost their jobs as companies continue to close down due to the effects of the virus outbreak. Facebook is canceling big events through June of next year because of the pandemic. NPR's Shannon Bond reports the tech giant is taking a slow approach to letting employees return to the office.
In a post on Facebook, CEO Mark Zuckerberg says most employees must stay home until at least the end of May, and they can choose to keep working from home through at least the summer. Zuckerberg says when people do return to the office, it will be in staggered waves to keep everyone safe and reduce the chance of further outbreaks. He says the small share of employees who can't do their jobs from home, like those who review posts about terrorism, suicide, and other sensitive issues, may be able to return to the office sooner than others. Tech companies were among the first big employers to cancel events and move to remote work. Shannon Bond, NPR News, San Francisco.
Officials say almost before it got started, a $349 billion government lending program for small businesses affected by the coronavirus is being put on hold. That's because the Small Business Administration, which is administering the program, announced today that it has reached its lending limit after approving nearly 1.7 million loans. Wall Street, the Dow was up 33. This is NPR.
I'm Nora Flaherty with this Maine news. The Maine CDC says today that the total number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 here has reached 796. 27 people have died, 333 have recovered, and the CDC has also identified another outbreak at a long-term care facility. Governor Janet Mills has signed an executive order that halts most evictions during Maine's state of emergency. She's also established a $5 million rent relief program and strengthened the penalties against landlords who attempt to illegally evict tenants. And the company that owns the Androscoggin Mill in Jay, which was heavily damaged in a massive explosion yesterday, says it will be a significant length of time before the mill will be able to produce pulp again. Ed Morin has more.
In a press release, Pennsylvania-based Pixel Specialty Solutions says the explosion was caused by a ruptured pulp digester that was extensively damaged. The company says it's now trying to determine what caused the blast and to identify additional corrective and preventative actions. While Pixel says it can't estimate exactly when any part of the mill will restart, it is exploring options to resume operating its paper machines, which were not damaged, as soon as possible. Pixel says that at the time of the incident, the mill employed around 500 people and around 200 were on site. No one was seriously injured in the explosion. For Maine Public Radio News, I'm Ed Morin.
In weather tonight, we'll have skies clearing in the south and lows in the 20s. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy north, partly sunny in the rest of the state with some light snow in the far south at night, windy with highs in the 40s. And on Saturday, partly sunny with highs in the 40s and 50s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include LifeLock, reminding consumers that only 1 in 5 victims of identity theft discovered their theft through a bank or credit card company. Learn more at lifelock.com/NPR.
All Things Considered is made possible by your support and by New England Cancer Specialists, saluting their own healthcare professionals and those all over Maine who are working to keep people safe during this critical time. By Woodford's Family Services, reminding you that you can make a difference in the life of a Maine child today by becoming a foster parent. Woodfords.org. And by First Peer, specializing in Shopify and offering strategic retail and e-commerce solutions in Portland and beyond. Firstpeer.com.
News. This is All Things Considered. I'm Elsa Chang in Los Angeles.
And I'm Ari Shapiro in Washington. The White House is set to announce new guidelines on reopening the country. These guidelines recommend distinct phases by which states can relax their social distancing rules, and states must meet certain requirements to move ahead to each new phase of reopening. The ball will be firmly in the court of governors to decide how to move forward. Joining us now with more are NPR health correspondent Rob Stein and White House reporter Aisha Roscoe. Good to have you both here.
Hello.
Hey there.
Aisha, let's start with you. President Trump has obviously been impatient to do this. Every day we hear him talk about how urgent it is to restart the economy again. What can you tell us about what's in these guidelines?
So my colleague Tamara Keefe obtained a copy of these guidelines, and they're suggesting 3 phases for states to reopen. And in each phase, the social distancing gets less strict. To move through these phases, a state or region would need to have 14 days where cases of the virus are going down. They're leaving it up to states to decide, but they're recommending that the states also have data, the ability to test people, and the ability to trace cases. The guidelines also call for employers to have a system for checking temperatures and doing contact tracing themselves when people get sick at work.
So what kind of social distancing would we see in these 3 phases?
Phase 1 is similar to what we have now. People most at risk should stay home, and everyone should avoid gatherings of more than 10 people and work from home when possible, and schools and bars would remain closed. But you could allow, under this phase 1, sit-down restaurants to open up, movie theaters, churches, but with strict physical distancing protocols. And then, if it doesn't look like the cases are going up, you could move to phase 2. You could expand to gatherings to about 50 people, and even reopen schools. Phase 3 would be where things would return almost to normal, although obviously with the knowledge of this virus, you might not be doing handshakes and things like that, but with vulnerable people going out in public and visits to hospitals allowed again. But I have to stress that this is just recommendations. This is not something that the federal government is implementing. It would be up to the states.
So Rob, what do public health experts think about these guidelines?
Yeah, so the public health experts I've been in touch with are pleased with a lot of what they see here. They think it is a very thoughtful approach in many ways. They like the idea of the phased approach and doing things sort of slowly and making sure it's being driven by data, and that there are guidelines in how you should take individual steps and when you should ease things up. But the big concern here, there definitely are some concerns about this. The big one that I've been hearing from people is they think there really isn't enough emphasis on testing. I mean, it does mention testing, but it doesn't really give specific criteria for how much testing should be available. And most of the public experts I've been in touch with say you really need wide-scale testing available to be sure that you can identify any new outbreaks very quickly and stuff them out. And the same thing goes with what's known as contact tracing. We need kind of an army of contact tracers to identify anybody who might have been exposed, or else places that haven't had big problems could suddenly have a big outbreak, or places where you thought things were under control, it could come roaring back. So there's certainly some good things here, but there are things that people are concerned about, and that's not all, actually.
And that's not all. You say there's more. I mean, it sounds like perhaps they approve of the framework, but don't think there's enough infrastructure to make that framework realistic. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they'd like to see a lot more specifics about a lot of things in here. For example, they say it needs to be a downward trend, and how long does it have to continue for exactly? And there's also a reliance on, instead of testing, getting the actual results of testing, there seems to be more of a reliance on what's known as
what's called syndromic surveillance. That's like people showing up at their doctor's offices with symptoms of COVID-19, but who haven't necessarily been tested for COVID-19. And that's being seen by some public experts as an acknowledgement that we really don't have the testing infrastructure in place to really be sure that places, if they do reopen, that they won't get in trouble really quickly, and they'll have the facilities to sort of snuff out any new outbreaks.
Aisha, to return to you for a minute, the White House had this call with governors. Does that represent a sort of olive branch in a way after all of this very contentious back and forth about whose responsibility it was?
Well, it seems like President Trump has definitely had to walk back this idea that he has total authority, that the states have to get his permission before they act. And he said that at the beginning of this week, but over the past few days, he's acknowledged that it's the governors who are going to be leading this, that he does not have the authority to make them open back up, and he wasn't the one who shut things down. And so it does seem to be an acknowledgement of the fact that he can try to set a tone, but he can't kind of drive this car when it comes to the reopening.
All right, that's NPR White House reporter Aisha Roscoe and NPR's health correspondent Rob Stein. Thank you both.
Thank you.
As the nation tries to get the rate of new cases of coronavirus under control, there's another rate that is skyrocketing, the rate of people losing their jobs. We learned today that more than 5 million people applied for unemployment benefits last week. That is 22 million people total applying for benefits in the last 4 weeks. Devin Amato is one of them. He lives in Long Beach, California, and worked at a graphics and printing company. He was furloughed in March, and finances are tight for him and his wife right now.
We're definitely making cuts. We're definitely worried about where we're going to be in a couple months, even a month. Like right now, we're getting our produce, and we're basically using every single thing. We're cutting the tops of the carrots off and cooking those in soup. Everything that we can cook, we're cooking it.
In California, more than 660,000 people filed for unemployment last week. Julie Su is the state's Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development Agency, and she joins us now. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I saw that just yesterday, Governor Gavin Newsom expanded call center hours for the agency that handles unemployment claims here in California. Let me just ask you, what has it been like handling such a huge volume of claims right now?
Right, so this is definitely an unprecedented time for our unemployment insurance claim processing. This whole pandemic is not just hard for people physically, it's also a huge economic and emotional source of stress, and unemployment insurance is meant to tide people over. We have redirected over 1,300 staff to help handle unemployment insurance claims in order to keep our payments happening, and I'll say that many of them they volunteered to be redirected. So there's a tremendous recognition of the need and a desire to meet it. The governor did announce that we are going to expand our call center for unemployment insurance to 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. We have just worked across all of government to make sure that we are meeting this need, ensuring that our system doesn't crash so that we can prevent any disruption in our ability to get payments made. And then we also just this week started paying out the Federal CARES Act, $600 per week for up to 4 months for people who are eligible for UI.
Well, let me talk a little bit more about that. I want to discuss the enormous number of independent contractors and gig workers here in California. The relief package passed by Congress last month that you just mentioned, it does expand unemployment benefits to those kind of workers, but people in California will be able to apply for those benefits. Oh, did we lose?
Hello? Oh, I'm still
there. You are. I don't know if you were able to hear my question. Were you able to hear my question?
I heard you say people won't be able to apply for these benefits.
Yes, until April 28th. These are independent contractors and gig workers.